The night my wife came home with another man's bruises, I stopped believing forgiveness fixes betrayal. I'm Mike Walker, a home inspector. I'm paid to find cracks people miss. At 12:07 a.m., I found one in my own house. Mascara streaks, a torn collar, a name I'd never heard before. Travis. She wanted comfort. I chose consequences. I moved my son to the neighbors, called it in, and started a file. Timestamps, cameras, witnesses, because feelings don't hold up in court, but evidence does. 2 days later, the papers hit my hand. A protective order against me. Her bruises were suddenly mine. If you've ever been made the villain in your own home, you know that cold, ringing silence. This isn't a rage story. It's a receipt story. In the next minute, you'll see why I didn't beg, bargain, or pray it away. I documented the truth, and it changed everything for my son, my home, and the man who thought he could rewrite our story. I was wide awake in a sleeping house, doing what dads do when the clock crawls past midnight, checking the deadbolt, rereading school emails, pretending lukewarm coffee is a plan. Ethan was out cold down the hall, one sock off, math sheet on the nightstand. The fridge hummed like a tired old truck idle at a red light. I scrolled through the same 3 headlines, then set the phone face down and listened. You learn as you get older that silence has layers, the honest kind and the kind that hides something. I thought about every inspection I'd ever done, the way a wall sounds different when there's a problem behind it. Tap, solid. Tap, hollow. That night, the house felt hollow. I adjusted the thermostat 2 degrees like it mattered, rinsed my mug, and stood in the doorway to the hall, watching a stripe of nightlight cut across the floor. Then I heard it, metal on metal, slow and careful, the unmistakable slide of a key finding a lock. The door bumped the stop and paused, like it wasn't sure it belonged here. Then Jessica stepped in. Her hair was wind-tangled. Mascara had drifted into dark commas under her eyes. The collar of her blouse was crooked, one thread pulled like a question mark. For half a second, muscle memory took over. I almost said, "You're late," the way couples do when they've had this fight before. But the hall light hit her face, and every casual line I'd prepared died in my throat. There was a bloom of purple under her jaw, the shape of a thumbprint shadowing her skin. Her sleeve slipped, and I saw marks around her forearm, like something had wrapped and squeezed. She winced as the door clicked shut behind her. My body moved before my brain did. The chair scraped the tile. The mug tipped. Coffee bled. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "I don't want to talk," she whispered, but the bruises were already saying everything and more. I stepped closer, slow, careful, the way you approach a cracked beam you suspect won't hold. The smell hit me first. Not her shampoo, not the citrus dryer sheets, not our house. Cologne, musky, unfamiliar, the kind that arrives before a man and lingers after he leaves. It threaded through her perfume like a bad note in a good song. I've worked inside strangers' walls for years. You learn to read a room without words. Mud in a footprint, fresh paint over water stains, a window that sticks when the frame swells from something you can't see. This was the same lesson, except the room was my marriage. Jessica brushed at the smeared mascara, avoiding the bruises like a person ignoring a check engine light. "I fell," she said, too fast. I studied the fingerprints written in purple and thought about force, angles, grip. Falls don't leave bracelets. Someone does. A name I didn't know crowded my mouth like a splinter. It hadn't surfaced yet, but it would. I blocked the hallways to the bathroom with a hand on the jamb. "No," I said, keeping my voice level for Ethan's sake. "Not yet." She flinched like the word was a touch. "Mike, I'm exhausted." Her blouse trembled at the torn collar. "I just want to clean up." I pointed to the kitchen chair, the one we bought when money was tighter and promises were cheaper. "Sit." She sank down and winced when her back met the wood. The clock above the stove ticked like an angry metronome. "You fell," I repeated, setting the syllables down one by one. "And the floor grabbed your arm." Her mouth opened, then closed. "You're never home," she tried, reaching for an argument older than our mortgage. I shook my head once. "Don't change the subject. Tell me what happened." Silence swelled, heavy as wet drywall. "It was an accident," she said to her hands. "Someone put their hands on you," I corrected. "I want a name." The room held its breath, waiting. I kept my voice low, the way you do when a kid's asleep and a storm isn't. "Look at me, Jess." She stared at her hands like they were a script she couldn't read. I pulled out a chair and sat across from her, elbows off the table the way my dad taught me when respect mattered. "Here's what I know," I said. "Those marks aren't from a fall, and the cologne in my hallway isn't ours." The kitchen clock clicked forward, small and loud. I counted the ticks in my head, 1, 2, 3, until my pulse matched the sound. "I'm not yelling," I added, "because yelling doesn't change facts. But our son is down the hall, and he deserves facts." She swallowed. I could see the moment she started choosing words instead of truth. "Don't," I said, palm open. "We're past stories. Give me reality." Sometimes, when I'm inspecting, I tap a wall and wait. If it's hollow, it answers. "Say it," I told her. "Say his name." She tried to sidestep with a grievance, like couples do when they've run this loop before. "You're never home, Mike." I let it pass. Married people collect arguments like old phone chargers, tossed in a drawer, never really gone. "The name," I repeated. Her jaw worked the way people chew a pill they don't want to swallow. "Travis," she said finally, and the sound felt like a dropped tool on concrete. "Travis. Cole." I didn't recognize it, but my body did. Tight chest, cold fingers, the old fight or flight spark. I remembered our budget spreadsheet, how every expense has a category. This moment filed itself under non-negotiable. She kept talking, soft, blaming loneliness the way folks blame the weather. "We all get lonely. Most of us don't burn down the house to feel warm." "How long?" I asked. "Weeks," she murmured. "Months," I heard. There was a beat of silence where we both pretended the word accident would hold. It wouldn't. His name sat on the table between us like a verdict. There's a version of me that might have slammed a door or the past on repeat. I didn't. I stepped back, the way you step off a rotten stair before it gives. My voice went steady, the kind guys my age use when a tire blows on the highway and a kid's in the back seat. "I'm not touching you," I said, both hands visible. "I'm not shouting. I'm not threatening." She blinked, confused by the lack of noise. "I'm listening," I added, "and I'm deciding." Older men told me once that manhood isn't muscle, it's management of fear, of anger, of time. I opened the Notes app, typed the date, the time, the details I could verify. "You wanted comfort," I said, "but comfort without consequence is how we got here." A long breath left my chest like a valve turning. "I won't be the villain you can point to or the bandage you can hide behind." Her eyes flashed. "Then what are you?" "Accountability," I said, standing up. I thought about all the weekends I'd spent fixing other people's problems, tightening loose rails, shoring up weak beams while letting my own foundation settle out of square. "You chose him," I said, each word placed like brick. "Go to him for bandages." The sentence surprised even me with how clean it sounded. She pulled back like a door on a warped hinge. "You're cruel," she snapped, suddenly finding heat. "No," I answered, calm as a level bubble finding center. "I'm clear." I pointed toward the bathroom, then away from it. "If you want a hospital, I'll drive you. If you want the truth, we can sit. But if you want to pretend, you'll need a different address." Her face hardened. The mask people wear when the old tricks stop paying out. "You'll regret this," she said, but even her threat felt tired. "What I regret," I told her, "is not drawing this line sooner." The clock ticked again, louder now, like it agreed. "I'm going to get our son." And parents know the drill. Shoes by the door, a backpack that never quite zips, the stuffed thing with a ridiculous name. I climbed the stairs, every step a choice. Ethan was starfished across his sheets, one sock on, his dinosaur drooping off the pillow like it was guarding him. I packed the overnight bag with quiet hands. Pajamas, toothbrush, the book we've read so often I can do the voices half asleep. I wrote a sticky note for the morning math sheet, stuck it on the folder. Downstairs, Jessica hovered in the hallway, small and stubborn. "Where are you taking him?" "Mrs. Duffy's," I said. "She'll be up. She's always up." There's a comfort in good neighbors, the kind who remember your kid's birthday and your trash day. I scooped Ethan gently. He mumbled and settled against my shoulder like he used to when he was 3. At the door, I paused. "Lock it behind me," I told Jessica, "and think about what you'll say when I get back." Then I stepped into the night. I buckled Ethan into the back seat at Mrs. Duffy's and waited until her porch light blinked twice, our quiet code for "he's fine." Then I sat in my truck and did what grown men do when feelings want the wheel. I made calls. First to Marlene Jenkins, Jessica's mom. I kept it simple and specific. Time, condition, what I saw, what I did. Older folks appreciate straight talk. Marlene always has. She went quiet, then said, "Thank you for calling me first." Next, I dialed non-emergency police. I logged the time out loud for the recorder in my dash cam. Midnight plus 23 described the bruises, the argument, and that I'd moved our son for safety. I wasn't pressing charges. I was planting flags. In my line of work, you mark what you can measure. Names, times, actions. I repeated it all back to the operator, slow and steady, like reading off measurements that might decide whether a beam holds. When I hung up, the truck felt smaller, but the record felt solid. I didn't drive anywhere right away. I just sat under the street lamp, the kind that paints everything a tired yellow, like an old photograph. My hands shook in the quiet. I laid them flat on my jeans, the way my grandfather once taught me when he said, "If you can't control the world, control your posture." The steering wheel ticked as it cooled. A moth banged itself dumb against the glass over and over, like it had a point to prove. I thought about the first truck I ever owned, how the dash light was burnt out, and I learned to steer by feel. That's what this night was. No perfect light, just a lane line and the choice to stay with it. I opened my notes and typed 3 sentences I could stand behind at any hour. She arrived injured. I moved our son. I reported it. Then I added one more, because honesty isn't afraid of daylight. I'm scared of what comes next. There's a line I used to throw around on job sites when folks wanted quick fixes. We don't tape over structural problems. It always got a nod. Sitting in that cab, I realized I'd said it for other people's houses because it was easier than saying it for mine. I used to fix cracks. Now I was living inside one. Not a poetic crack. An actual separation. A gap between what we promised and what we practiced. Older men know that sound a house makes when it settles wrong. Little pops in the night. A door that won't latch. A floor that slants enough to roll a marble. That's marriage when the truth goes missing. I pictured Ethan's marble race set, the way a tiny tilt changes everything. I promised myself, out loud so it couldn't slither away, that I'd be the man who measures twice and cuts once. Not to hurt anyone, to hold what mattered. And if holding required documentation, I'd keep the receipts neat. 2 days later, I was buttering toast at Paul's place. My own kitchen felt haunted when the doorbell rang. A tired guy in a gray uniform checked his clipboard. "Mike Walker?" I nodded, and he handed me a thick envelope like it burned. "You've been served," he said, already turning. The toast went hard in my mouth. I slid a finger under the flap and read half of it standing up. Legal sentences that started out vague and ended sharp. My name. Her name. Words like temporary and prohibited that don't feel temporary when they land in your chest. Paul watched me, jaw tight, the way old friends do when they know a joke won't help. I took the papers to the table, spread them flat, and started underlining facts with a pencil. Habit. Control the inch you can control. Somewhere in there, a coffee ring grew around the word hearing. I heard my own voice go level again. Okay, we keep doing what we've been doing. We prove. The headline inside the paperwork wasn't a headline, but it read like one. Protective order. The accusation said I was the danger. My hands, these hands that fix loose handrails and teach a kid to hold a bat, were suddenly the villain. I felt the same dizziness you get when a room looks familiar, but the furniture's been moved. Older folks call it disorientation. I call it Tuesday in a bad week. I breathed through my nose, the way Maya later told me to, and I did the next right things. I called her office. I scanned the order, saved the file twice, backed up the Nest footage, wrote a clean timeline from memory while memory was still warm. Then, because fathers don't get to fall apart on weekdays, I texted Marlene. Received court papers. I will comply. I will contest. Ethan first. Always. The shock didn't fade. It just found a shelf. And under it, a simple drum beat began. Document. Verify. Protect. Maya Patel's office didn't look like TV law. No wall of trophies, no dramatic lighting. Just clean desks, a humming air vent, and a bowl of peppermint candies older folks always appreciate. She shook my hand like a contractor signs a bid. Firm, quick, no fluff. "Tell me the facts, Mike," she said, and I did in the same order I'd logged them. The bruises, the name, the move to Mrs. Duffy's, the non-emergency call, the envelope. She didn't flinch at the mess or waste a second on outrage. She started sketching a timeline on a yellow pad, arrows and boxes like framing a room. "We can work with this," she said. "You stayed calm, you documented, you moved your child to safety. That matters." I felt my shoulders drop a notch, the way a house settles after you sister a joist. Then she looked up, sharp. "From here on out, we don't chase rumors. We build, piece by piece." I nodded. For the first time that week, I felt less alone. I must have looked like a man trying not to shake because Maya slid a glass of water across the desk and said, "Calm isn't weakness. It's strategy." It landed like advice my dad would have given if he wore a suit. She walked me through the order. "Comply with every line," she said, tapping the page. "We don't feed a story we didn't write." Then she showed me the roadmap. "File our response, secure the footage, identify witnesses, lock down our timestamps. And Mike," she added softer, "don't call Jessica to argue. If it doesn't produce evidence, it doesn't happen." I thought about how men my age were raised to fix it now, even if now means breaking the only thing working, our self-control. I breathed slow through my nose, counted to 4 the way she demonstrated. "Good," she said. "That breath right there, that's you choosing the outcome over the impulse." I pocketed a peppermint. Small as it was, it tasted like a plan. Back at Paul's kitchen table, the kind with a burn ring from a pan we were too young to care about years ago, we turned into clerks. I exported the Nest clips, labeled them by time, 11:37 p.m. Arrival 12:04 a.m., exit with Ethan. I screenshotted the call log, highlighted the calls to Marlene and non-emergency. Paul drafted a statement for Mrs. Duffy to review. Simple, exact words about when I dropped my son and why. I photographed Jessica's torn collar I'd bagged as clothing evidence because Maya said paper trails love company. Then I backed it all up twice. One copy on a drive in a zip bag like it needed weatherproofing. Men who've ever kept a service log on an old truck know the feeling. Not glamorous, just vital. When the folder finally had weight, dates, times, images, statements, I felt that click you get when a stubborn latch finally lines up. Not victory, alignment. The story was trying to wobble. The record wouldn't let it. That night, the printer chattered until the pages felt like a blizzard on the table. I made the mistake of flipping my phone to a photo of us years back. Pancake Saturdays, Ethan with syrup on his chin, Jessica laughing at something small and good. Memory is a kind liar. It crops out the hairline cracks. I let the picture sit there anyway, because older men know comparison cuts 2 ways. It can haunt you, or it can remind you what standards look like. I whispered a quiet promise the way you talk to a house before a tough repair. We're going to be square again, not with nostalgia, with truth. I filed the photo back where it belonged, past tense, and picked up the yellow pad. "Measure twice," my grandfather used to say, pressing a pencil into my palm. "Cut once." I measured my words, my choices, the next morning's plan. Then I set an alarm for early because hope without work is just another story. In Maya's conference room the next day, we ran the timeline like a drill. She circled 2 items and leaned back. "This is more than a breakup, Mike. She's trying to control the narrative around your son." It wasn't news, but it hit different hearing it plain. Control the narrative means decide who's dangerous, who's safe, who gets the keys. Men my age know that once a label sticks, at work, at church, in a neighborhood, it takes a crowbar to pry it off. "So we don't argue with labels," Maya said. "We replace them with facts the court can't ignore." I pictured Ethan's teacher reading a story to the class, deciding which pages to skip. No, not this time. We'd bring every page. Maya slid me a checklist. Deliver copies to the clerk. Confirm Mrs. Duffy's availability. Text Marlene a concise statement. No opinions. "Tonight," she said, "rest. Tomorrow we file." I pocketed the list and felt the line harden under my feet. The next chapter would be ours. Paul showed up with gas station coffee and that look old friends get when they're ready to lift something heavy with you. We cleared his kitchen table like it was a workbench. Out went the mail pile, down came a legal pad. "What do we actually know?" he asked. It's funny how a simple question can steady your hands. We wrote it all. Times, places, names, what could be proved, what was still smoke. Men our age have done this 100 ways. Budget sheets, little league schedules, that list before a road trip where you swear you won't forget the cooler this time. Same muscle, different weight. Paul mapped streets on his phone while I checked camera settings and battery levels. "We're not detectives," I said. "We don't have to be," he answered. "We're dads. We're thorough." The plan felt plain and strong. Start where the scent was loudest. Follow it to the source. Keep the record honest. Then his screen lit up with a name that made us both sit straighter. "Lakeview Condominiums, Westlake," Paul read, turning the phone so I could see the pin. He'd found the building through a comment thread and a little memory. Jessica once mentioned a balcony view over the water. Life leaves breadcrumbs if you're willing to sweep carefully. I knew the place. I'd inspected a unit there years ago. Clean lobby. Cameras that worked. A property manager who ran a tight ship and remembered faces. My stomach did that slow elevator drop you get when a meeting you've been dreading becomes a calendar event. "If they still keep footage," I said, "there's a clock on us." Paul tapped the map, tracing an approach like we were planning a fishing trip. Where to park, what time security rotates, which entrance logs visitors. Ordinary talk for an unordinary errand. He slid me the phone. "You call," he said. "You speak calm like a sidewalk." I laughed once, short. "Sidewalks crack," I told him. "Exactly," he said, "and you know how to read them." I stood in the parking lot under Texas sun and dialed Lakeview Management. A woman with a brisk voice answered. "Ms. Green," the kind of voice that's heard every excuse and prefers specifics. I gave them name, date, time range, a short summary of why the footage mattered, and the case number Maya had opened. Older adults know this dance. You can't demand help. You invite it. "I'm not asking you to judge," I said, "just to preserve what your cameras saw." She hesitated, then softened a degree. "We have a 7-day retention on lobby and garage," she said. "You're inside the window." I felt the first clean inhale I'd taken in days. "I'll email formal notice by noon," I promised, "and an attorney will follow with a subpoena." "Send it to my direct address," she said, spelling it twice. "If it's there today, I'll flag the clips so they don't get overwritten." When we hung up, I stared at my notes. 7 days is a mercy. Now we had to earn it. Maya answered on the first ring. "We've got a cooperative manager and a short clock," I said, pacing the length of Paul's living room. She didn't waste a syllable. "I'll draft the subpoena now and courier it. You send your email to establish the paper trail." Some people wield outrage. Maya wields process. It's drier, but it cuts cleaner. I typed carefully. Subject line with date and time, bullet points, attachment with the incident number, and copied Maya. Then I read it out loud because words behave better when they have to pass through breath. Paul printed 2 copies for our folder and slid me a pen. "Sign your name like it means something," he joked, and for a second, we were 20 again. My phone pinged. An email from Ms. Green. Received. Holding requested footage pending court order. Maya replied a minute later. "Courier en route. Expect confirmation by 3 p.m. Paper doesn't swing a fist. It builds a door that only opens one way." That evening, Miss Green shared a preview still. No sound. Grainy, the blue wash of lobby light. But even in bad compression, the shapes were loud. Jessica, head down, blouse skewed, a man at her elbow. Travis, hand clamped around her wrist. Not guiding. Dragging. The image hit like cold water after a long road. I felt anger rise, then turn into something steadier. Older. Resolve. Paul leaned in, jaw set. "There it is," he said, like we'd finally spotted the problem behind the wall. "I've watched plenty of inspection videos. Most are boring. This one wasn't. The angle was bad. The truth was clear. Cameras don't care who meant what. They record. And sometimes that's the only mercy a day gives you." I forwarded the still to Maya with the subject line, "Matches our timeline." She replied, "Full footage tomorrow. Chain of custody secured." I exhaled through my teeth. "Okay," I told the room. And the room told it back. The story had been loud. Now the record would speak. I cued the Lakeview lobby video on Paul's laptop and let it roll like a slow heartbeat. The timestamp sat in the corner, 10:53 p.m., as steady as a metronome. Jessica entered first, shoulders folded in, and then Travis, his hand locked around her wrist like a vice. No audio, just posture and pressure, which is sometimes louder. I told Maya in our notes, truth had a timestamp, but it landed different when I watched the numbers climb. 10:53:11, 10:53:12, the second hand writing a story none of us could edit. I thought about all the time-stamped moments that built a life. Ethan's first breath, our mortgage signing, Saturday pancakes, and how a single line of digits can separate a lie from a ledger. I clipped the segment, saved it twice, labeled it clean. My hands were steady now. That practical calm older men use when a pipe bursts. Shut the water, find the source, document the damage. I closed the lid and whispered to the screen, "Thank you for not caring." Courthouses smell like paper and resolve. We sat at the petitioner's table under lights that make everyone look a little guilty. Jessica kept her eyes down, a small purse clutched to her ribs, the way people hold secrets when they're tired of carrying them. Her attorney flipped through pages with fingers that moved fast until they didn't. I focused on my breath. 4 in, 4 out, the way Maya taught. Older folks know that rooms like this decide reputations that outlive the day. The bailiff called the case. The judge, a gray-haired woman with reading glasses, asked for opening remarks. Jessica's lawyer started strong, then stumbled on a date that didn't match the order. For the first time in a week, I felt the floor level under me. Maya laid a hand on my forearm, a quiet anchor. I kept my palms open on the table, wedding band gone but the groove still there, and reminded myself, we're not here to win a feeling. We're here to prove a sequence. Your Honor, Maya said, voice steady as a plumb line, the record says otherwise. She presented the nest footage first, me carrying Ethan out at 12:04 a.m., the door closing soft, the empty house. The timestamp was a witness with no bias. Then the Lakeview clip filled the screen. Jessica's face turned away. Travis's grip obvious even with bad pixels. Maya handed up urgent care notes, bruised knuckles right hand, dated the morning after. Finally, Mrs. Duffy stood, a tidy woman in a cardigan that made me think of report cards and bake sales. He brought the boy to me, she said, clear and simple, because something was wrong. He wanted his son safe. No flourishes, just facts. Jessica's attorney objected twice and sat down 3 times. In the gallery, I heard paper whisper. The judge leaned forward, reading glasses perched low, and asked 2 questions nobody in our row could answer without inventing a new timeline. That's the thing about evidence. It doesn't shake hands with stories. The judge removed her glasses and looked at us the way teachers look at 8th graders who think they're clever. The temporary protective order is dissolved, she said, each word set down like a brick. Mr. Walker will have temporary primary custody. Supervised visitation for Ms. Walker until a full hearing. The gavel tapped once, lighter than the movies, heavier than anything I've heard. I didn't smile. There wasn't space for it. Relief isn't a parade. It's the absence of sirens. Maya squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "Breathe." I did. Jessica didn't lift her head. Her attorney stacked papers that now read like a different book. The bailiff called the next case. We stood, gathered our folders, and left the way you leave a doctor's office after good news. Carefully, because you don't trust your legs yet. In the hallway, Paul grinned and then swallowed it back when he saw my face. "Okay," he said softly. "Okay." We weren't done. We were just no longer drowning. I unlocked my front door and stepped into a silence that sounded like a held breath. The living room looked exactly as I'd left it, except it didn't. Truth changes rooms even when you don't move a chair. I traced the edge of the couch, the way you do after a funeral when you're not sure where to put your hands. Ethan's backpack hung on its hook like a promise waiting to be kept. I stood in the kitchen, touched the cool counter, stared at the clock that had ticked through all of this, and never once asked for context. People expect celebration after a ruling. Balloons, laughter, a loud something. But older men know the real victory is quieter. A bed you can sleep in, a door you can lock, a plan that holds. I poured a glass of water and listened to the pipes. Steady. For the first time in days, I let my shoulders drop. Truth doesn't celebrate. It breathes. Then I did too. That evening, I did the most ordinary thing I could think of. Boiled water and made spaghetti. Ethan grated Parmesan like it was a competition, and I let him win. We talked about a spelling test, about whether Captain America could fix a leaky sink, about nothing that bleeds. Older dads know this move. When the world tilts, you put dinner on the table and square the plates. The sauce simmered, the house smelled like tomatoes and something close to normal. I set 2 forks, 2 glasses, and a paper towel because I couldn't bring myself to unfold cloth napkins on a day like this. Ethan told a joke from school that didn't land, and I laughed anyway. Big, because you don't grade a child's rescue attempts. We ate until our bowls were clean, then read one chapter and 2 pages more. After lights out, I packed his lunch, wiped counters, and walked the first floor. Locks, windows, stove knobs. Touch points of a man settling his home. Peace felt possible, until it didn't. On my final pass, I noticed it. The garage door wasn't flush. Not open. Just an inch of wrong, like a picture frame tilted after you swear you straightened it. I stepped closer and rested my fingers on the cool metal. The house breathed back. Did I do that earlier? Maybe, or maybe not. Older men know that doubt doesn't shout, it whispers. I checked the side door, latched. The interior light, off. I cycled the opener and let the door seal, listened for the thud that says closed in a language every homeowner speaks. It came. I double-clicked the lock and stood there longer than the moment required, reading the air for what didn't belong. My phone buzzed with a work reminder for an inspection I'd already rescheduled. Normal life tapping the glass. I walked the hallway again, peeked at Ethan's chest rising and falling, then set my phone on the nightstand screen down. "We're safe," I told the room. And the room agreed. Quietly, politely, like a lie that hadn't hatched yet. Morning started with a sound I felt before I named. Car doors slamming, firm and official. Blue light washed across my bedroom wall like a cheap aquarium. I grabbed jeans, a sweatshirt, and took the stairs 2 at a time, soft footing past Ethan's door. 2 officers stood on my porch with faces set to neutral. "Mr. Walker," the first said, "we need to speak with you." I stepped outside, pulling the door nearly shut behind me. A reflex older dads develop when they live in 2 worlds at once. Adult business and a sleeping child. "We received a call about suspicious activity around your garage late last night," he continued. My stomach found the inch of wrong I'd seen and sat down in it. The second officer glanced at his notebook. "We conducted a brief check for safety and observed items of concern." Concern is a soft word. It still scrapes. I kept my hands where they could see them and talked like we were all trying to land the same plane. "Inside the garage," the officer said, "we located a bag behind the workbench." He read from the notebook like a pastor at a funeral. "Loose prescription pills without labels, a prepaid burner phone with messages about picking up more product, and approximately $300 in cash." The porch felt smaller than it had any right to be. "Those aren't mine," I said. Not loud, not frantic, just the kind of flat a man gets when his name is on something he didn't touch. The first officer kept his face steady. "We'll need to ask you a few questions and collect the items." I thought of the reflection on the chrome bumper, the inch of night at the garage door, the way Travis's grin had looked in the courthouse hallway, like a man who enjoys having time on his side. My breath went shallow and then obeyed. "Okay," I said. "Please document everything. Photos, chain of custody. I want this clean. If there's a trap, the only way out is light." They bagged the bag, photographed the footprint smudge by the bench, and logged the serial of the phone. I answered questions in complete sentences because men my age learned that grammar sometimes keeps you out of handcuffs. When they finished, I asked for the report number and wrote it twice, paper and phone, like a man tying 2 knots. After they left, Paul showed up with coffee he didn't remember buying and eyes that said he already knew. I told him what they found. He stared past me at the garage like he could rewind it by will. "He's framing me," I said, surprised by how steady it sounded. Saying a thing out loud nails it to the studs. Paul nodded once. "Then we make it obvious." I texted Maya and Detective Alvarez, short, factual, timestamps, the kind of message you could read into a microphone. I glanced down the hall where Ethan's cereal spoon waited in a clean bowl. "We stay calm," I said, answering myself. "And we prove." Maya arrived first, brisk and composed, the kind of calm that makes your heartbeat remember its job. Detective Alvarez followed, coat still creased from the car, eyes scanning like a man who trusts patterns more than promises. We stood in my kitchen with the morning light, finding every crumb on the counter. I laid out the facts like tools on a towel, what the officers found, the inch of open garage, the report number, my notes. Alvarez nodded through each piece. "We'll pull prints and canvass the neighbors," he said, low and even. Maya touched the paperwork with one finger. "Chain of custody is clean so far," she added. "You did the right things." I poured coffee because older men know sometimes that's the only useful job left in the room. My hand shook once and stopped. "He's playing time," I said. Maya met my eyes. "Then we play record." Alvarez snapped his notebook shut. "If it was planted, it left a trail." A knock at the door cut the air in half. CPS stood on my porch. Ms. Reynolds, clipboard firm against a sweater that reminded me of open houses and polite bad news. She introduced herself gently and said the words that rearrange a kitchen. "Temporary safety plan." I looked past her shoulder at the driveway where Ethan's bike leaned brave and crooked. We moved into the living room, Alvarez stepping back to give space, Maya's jaw set but soft. Ms. Reynolds explained the process, each sentence careful, like carrying glass. "Older parents know that systems aren't enemies or friends. They're machines. You feed them facts and pray they don't grind you." I kept saying, "Yes, ma'am," and "I understand," because fighting the messenger never saved a child. Ethan appeared at the hallway, hair asleep, eyes wide. "Am I in trouble?" he asked. "Nobody," I said, and a piece of me shattered. I couldn't pick up yet. Papers were signed. A bag was packed. The door opened. The house exhaled. The silence after held teeth. Out on the porch, I crouched to Ethan's height and tucked his hoodie the way my dad used to fuss with mine before Little League. "How long?" he asked, small and brave. "Not long," I said, careful with a promise I intended to build with both hands. Ms. Reynolds waited a respectful distance, the car door open like a clock. "I'll fix this," I told him, and let each word sit. "I promise." He nodded the way 7-year-olds nod when they decide to loan you their faith again. I placed his favorite dinosaur in the side pocket of his backpack so he could find it without looking. Older dads know you can't shield your kid from every storm, but you can show them how to stand under one without drowning. He climbed into the back seat and pressed his palm to the window. I matched it. Then the car rolled away and the driveway felt like a church after a funeral, flowers and quiet, and an ache that didn't know where to go. Paul didn't knock. He just came in with his laptop and that "we're not done" look, and we set up at the kitchen table like we were rebuilding a carburetor. Alvarez hovered nearby with a notepad. Maya took a call with the courthouse, voice clipped and efficient. "Driveway cam," Paul said, cueing the feed. The footage stuttered alive, porch light glow, moths doing their dumb brave dance. We scrubbed through the hours like panning for gold in a creek you're not sure ever held any. I watched myself walk in and out, secure and resecure, the way men do when they want control to look like safety. "Pause," I said, pointing at a shimmer near the edge of frame, my neighbor's chrome bumper catching the light like a wink. Paul zoomed. The pixels fought us. We kept asking. Alvarez leaned in, murmuring, "Reflections can be witnesses." We ran it again, frame by frame, the way older guys read fine print, slow, patient, unwilling to blink at the line that matters. Paul sharpened the crop, and the shimmer became a shadow of letters, white on black, bending across the curve of chrome. "There," he whispered, like we were in a deer stand. Alvarez steadied the laptop with one palm while I named what I wanted to see. LTR. The next frames clicked forward, and the numbers followed like they'd been waiting to be called. 4, 7, 1. My chest did that tight release thing you get when a stubborn bolt finally turns. We ran it again to be sure. LTR 471, not a full plate yet, but a backbone. "That's his truck," I said, voice gone level. In my head, I pictured Travis's black F-150, the dent near the tailgate, the way he idled too long. Maya returned as Paul exported the still. "Chain the file," she said. Alvarez was already dialing. "Traffic cams near Maple and 5th, he told dispatch. Older men know the small wins count most. A number, a frame, a step. The lie had swagger. The truth had digits. And digits hold. I pulled up an old photo on my phone, the one I'd snapped weeks back in the Lakeview parking garage when I still thought observation could outrun dread. Black F-150, small dent by the tailgate, the bumper sticker half peeled like a bad alibi. I zoomed in on the plate I'd jotted in my notes from that night. LTR 471. Then I set it side by side with Paul's reflection still, tilting the screens until the light hit both the same way. Men my age have matched worse with less. Mystery bolts to the right socket, kids' bike parts to last year's model. Same satisfaction when it clicks. I whispered the letters and numbers like a combination lock and felt the tumblers fall. Match. My chest loosened the way it does when an engine finally turns after you've checked spark, fuel, and air. "This is him," I said into the room that had held too many doubts lately. Paul nodded once. "We're not guessing anymore." I saved the side-by-side, stamped the time, and texted Alvarez. "Confirmed." Alvarez called back with the voice you want on your side. "Zero drama, all traction. Traffic cams at Maple and 5th picked up the F-150. He said, papers rustling like steady rain. Inbound at 11:22 p.m., outbound at 11:36. Plate reads LTR 471, clear as a church bell." I closed my eyes and saw the inch of open garage again, the bag behind the bench, the quiet that felt staged. "We'll pull the raw files and certify chain," he added. "If he was here, we'll put him here on paper." Older men know there's a difference between a hunch and a record. Only one stands when the room gets fluorescent. "Anything you need from me?" I asked. "Stay available. Don't engage," he said, which is cop for don't take the bait. After we hung up, I stood at the sink, hands on cool porcelain, and let the timeline lay itself out like lumber. 11:22 in, 11:30-ish mischief. 11:36 out. Wood squared, cuts clean. Now we make it hold. Maya slid into a chair at my table like it was a war room, laptop open before it finished touching wood. "We're filing an emergency motion to challenge the planted evidence," she said, keys clacking a rhythm you could set a watch to. "Exhibits, the driveway reflection still, traffic cam confirmations, your garage photos, and an affidavit from Alvarez about chain of custody." She didn't sell hope, she packaged facts. "We'll argue tampering and request immediate relief on visitation and property searches." I signed where she pointed, digital and ink, because in a fight like this, you leave footprints on purpose. She read the motion out loud once, cut 2 adjectives, then read it again. "Older folks know the truth doesn't need dressing. It needs delivery." "Courier in 20, she said, already emailing the clerk and opposing counsel. The printer spit pages like an engine finding RPM. "This isn't loud," she said, stacking the packet. "It's precise." And precise is how you rebuild a life that someone tried to bend. That afternoon, during a supervised handoff for a forgotten homework folder, Jessica showed up with a practiced softness, chin tucked, voice small, innocence ironed smooth. "I heard the police were at your place," she said, concern stitched into every syllable like a store-bought sympathy card. Older men who've lived through layoffs and funerals know the difference between care and performance. This was performance. I kept my tone even for Ethan, who stood between us, backpack high on his shoulders. "He's fine," I said, more for him than her. "We're following court instructions." She touched the strap of her purse like it was a rosary. "I just want what's best for our son." The supervisor noted the exchange, pen quiet but present. Over her shoulder, a black F-150 idled half a block down, sun flaring off chrome. She didn't look at it. I did. Call it a father's radar or a man's memory for trouble. I felt the hairs on my arm wake up. Some stories rehearse, some stories wait. He stepped out of the truck, like a man arriving late to a small town and wanting everyone to notice. Travis, hat low, that half smile people wear when they think they own the ending. He didn't come close. He didn't have to. The look carried just fine. "You can't prove anything," he called, pitched casual for the sidewalk but aimed straight at my chest. I didn't move. Men my age have learned the power of stillness. On a job site, in a meeting, at a dinner table where teenagers test fences. The supervisor cleared her throat. Jessica's eyes darted between us like a sparrow trapped in a garage. I slid my phone from my pocket and held it waist high, lens up, recording without flourish. "Hi, Travis," I said, voice level, name on tape. He laughed, a sound with no heat. "See you around." He climbed back in, the taillights blinked, and the truck rolled off. Paul stepped to my side. "Cliff notes?" he asked. I watched the street empty and answered, "Cliffhanger." Showdowns don't belong in parking lots. They belong where truth has witnesses. I called Marlene and Ron Jenkins and asked if we could meet at their place. Neutral ground, familiar walls, a couch where birthdays once happened. Older folks know that a living room changes the temperature of a conversation. I kept it simple. It's about Ethan's schedule and some evidence that needs eyes. Marlene hesitated, then said, "Come." I looped in Maya and Detective Alvarez. Maya to steer the facts, Alvarez to keep the air honest. Paul loaded the files on my laptop like we were packing a tool chest for a job we couldn't afford to get wrong. Before we left, I stood in Ethan's room, set his stuffed dinosaur upright, and whispered, "This is for you." On the drive over, the wipers clicked, even though the windshield was dry. Nerves have their own weather. Allez. We pulled to the curb outside the Jenkins' tidy lawn, porch light on at 3 p.m. The universal signal for we're expecting company. Marlene opened the door with a smile that couldn't stand up under its own weight. Ron hovered behind her, arms crossed in a way that said he'd once fixed more than a few engines and knew when something was running dirty. Jessica sat on the end of the sofa, hands folded tight, eyes flicking anywhere but mine. Travis leaned back in an armchair like it owed him money. One ankle over a knee, that same lazy smirk. Family pictures watched from the walls. Ethan on a tricycle, a Thanksgiving table, a beach day where sand stuck to sunscreen. Ordinary, which made all of this louder. I set the laptop on the coffee table, the same one where we'd played board games years back. "I'm going to show a sequence," I said, steady. "No commentary, just time and angles." Maya nodded. Alvarez stayed out of sight in the hallway, an extra backbone in case the room cracked. Paul took the chair beside me, hand near the space bar. We began. First clip, Nest Cam, 12:04 a.m. Me carrying Ethan out, the door closing soft. No audio, just purpose. Second, Lakeview lobby, 10:53 p.m. Jessica entering, Travis's hand locked on her wrist. The room's air shifted. Even pixels can bruise. I let the seconds tick because timestamps do the talking. Third, driveway reflection, my neighbor's chrome bumper. Letters bending across the curve like a confession trying not to be heard. LTR 471. I didn't look at faces while the clips rolled. I watched the clock, because clocks don't pick sides. When the last frame froze, I said what needed saying, and nothing more. These match our timeline. Maya slid urgent care notes across to Ron, one finger under the line about bruised knuckles. Marlene covered her mouth with her hand. Jessica stared at the carpet as if a pattern might save her. Travis shifted, eyes cutting for exits that weren't doors. Paul glanced at me. I tapped the laptop once. "One more," I said. Paul cued the audio and hit play. Barroom noise, clink, then Travis's voice, careless and proud. "Yeah, I planted the bag behind his workbench. He'll never see it coming." The words landed like dropped wrenches, heavy, unmistakable. There's a special quiet people make when a lie loses its last foothold. Ron stood so fast his recliner protested. Marlene whispered, "Oh God," into both hands. Jessica's face drained, mask sliding without a place to catch. I didn't gloat. I didn't move. Older men know victory worth keeping doesn't look like dancing. It looks like clarity. Travis shot up, chin forward, heat rising to a boil without a burner. "You recorded me?" Paul didn't answer because the better answer was already traveling down a hallway. I closed the laptop and folded my hands, the way you do when you're done proving and ready for the next part. The house itself seemed to lean in like old lumber recognizing the sound of a true cut. Then a new voice joined the room. "Enough," Detective Alvarez said, stepping from the hallway, badge out, tone calm as a level finding center. Travis spun, certain a grin could still save him. It couldn't. "Travis Cole, you're under arrest for filing a false report and tampering with evidence," Alvarez said, words precise as measurements. He moved with practiced economy. Wrist, turn, click. The handcuffs speaking in metal. Jessica sank into the couch like air leaving a tire. Ron's jaw worked. Marlene stared at the floor that had just become a witness. Paul stayed at my shoulder, still as a stud wall. I watched without triumph, just the kind of steady a man earns when his name gets its footing back. "You have the right to remain silent," Alvarez continued. Travis muttered something about lawyers and luck. The front door opened. Afternoon sun sliced the room, and for a second the dust glowed like proof made visible. As they walked him out, he threw a look over his shoulder that promised thunder. The door shut. The weather changed anyway. They walked him past the family photos, handcuffed, the red and blue from the cruiser stuttering across the Jenkins wallpaper like a broken promise. I followed to the doorway but stopped at the threshold the way you do at a hospital room, close enough to see, far enough to breathe. Travis tried to square his shoulders, but the metal dictated posture. Out on the porch, the neighbors' wind chimes clinked like they'd been waiting to be relevant. Older folks know that sound. Ordinary life refusing to cancel itself in the middle of your worst day. Alvarez kept his voice even, one hand on Travis's elbow, the other guiding the steps like a man who's done this enough to be gentle without being soft. The cuffs flashed again as they cleared the rail. I thought of the inch of night at my garage door, the bag by the bench, and how lies always need a shadow to grow. The squad car door opened. He ducked his head. The latch closed with a final click. Behind me, the house sank into a kind of post-storm quiet. Jessica stood, then folded, knees finding carpet like she'd rehearsed it without meaning to. "Mike," she said, palms up, eyes wet. "Please don't do this. Not here, not in front of my parents." The words were familiar, the way commercials are when you've heard them your whole life. Marlene hovered, torn between daughter and daylight. Ron didn't move. Hands and fists he wouldn't use, jaw set to the stubborn of a man who's watched engines fail for reasons that have names. There was a time when that voice from Jessica, soft, small, asking rescue, would have reached straight into my reflexes. Men my age were raised to fix, to carry, to absorb. I felt that old instinct stir, then stop at the line I'd drawn for Ethan and for myself. "I'm not doing anything to you," I thought, steadying myself on the back of a chair. "I'm refusing what you asked me to be." It felt less like hardness and more like honesty. She looked up at me from the carpet like the floor might testify. "We can start over," she whispered. "We can make this right." I kept my hands at my sides, visible and still. "Jess," I said, and my own voice surprised me with how even it was. "This is the bed you made." The words weren't sharp, they were level, like a carpenter checking plumb. "I'm not your bandage," I added. "I'm Ethan's dad. That's the job." Older men know the difference between kindness and enabling. One builds a bridge, the other builds a loop you can't exit. Her face went through 3 expressions too fast to name: anger, fear, bargaining, and then landed on tired. Marlene wiped at mascara with a tissue that did nothing but move it around. Ron finally looked at me, and there was something like respect there, or maybe just recognition that a man had chosen a post and would hold it. Outside, a car door shut. The room seemed to brace for whatever came next. Detective Alvarez stepped back into the living room long enough to give a nod that meant it's handled, then turned to follow the officers down the walk. The front door shut, and for a moment, the Jenkins house felt like an old church between hymns. Still, wooden. Everybody searching for the right page. Jessica stared at the rug pattern like it could solve for shame. Marlene touched her daughter's shoulder and got air. Ron cleared his throat once, a sound that belonged to fathers who've run out of useful words. I closed the laptop, wrapped the cord, and tucked it under my arm. Rituals a man uses to signal done when emotion wants another round. "We'll let the court speak next," Maya said softly, stacking documents with a librarian's care. Paul hovered at the doorway, ready to move when I did. I thanked Ron and Marlene for the room and the time, because manners are a kind of railing you hold on to when the stairs are steep. Then we stepped into daylight. On the drive back, the city looked exactly the same. Mailboxes, lawns, a kid on a scooter, and it felt almost rude how the world refused to match my insides. Paul didn't fill the air. Good friends know when silence is the tool you need. I parked in my own driveway and sat with the engine off, listening to the tick of cooling metal. Some messes can't be cleaned, only lived with. My grandfather used to say that about oil stains on the garage floor. You lay down absorbent, you scrub, and then you accept the darker patch that will always be there. You don't sell the house. You work around it and keep it safe. I walked through my quiet rooms and touched the door frames like I was checking studs. In Ethan's doorway, I straightened the dinosaur he likes to guard his pillow. "We're okay," I told the empty room, and it didn't argue. I set the evidence drive in the safe, closed it, and let the bolt slide home. Then I exhaled. 3 weeks later, Maya called while I was sorting mail at the kitchen counter, the same place life had tilted. "It's official," she said. "Travis was convicted, assault and tampering. His employer terminated him this morning." The words didn't ring like victory bells. They landed like levelers. Older men know the feeling, when a door that's been rubbing finally swings clean because someone planned it right. Maya laid out the rest: fines, probation terms, a note about mandatory counseling he'd probably sneer through. I thanked her the way you thank a plumber who crawled under your house in February, with real gratitude and room to breathe. After we hung up, I stood a minute longer, fingers on junk mail that suddenly felt lighter. Justice isn't a parade. It's a correction, a line redrawn where it drifted. I texted Paul a simple "it's done." He replied with a thumbs up and a picture of a perfectly seated screw. I laughed once, quietly. The storm hadn't vanished, but the wind had changed. At the final hearing, I wore the same jacket I'd worn to Ethan's first parent-teacher conference because I wanted my son to recognize me in rooms that write the future in ink. The judge reviewed everything: lobby footage, driveway reflection, audio confession, police reports, CPS notes. Labels slid off and records stuck. "Primary custody to Mr. Walker," she said. "Supervised visitation for Ms. Walker until further order. Counseling required. Restitution for fees." No drama, just measured sentences placed where they belong. Jessica kept her eyes on her hands, a tissue dissolving between her fingers. I didn't look for her reaction. I listened for the part that mattered: Ethan's schedule. Clean, stable, predictable. Maya squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "You built this the right way." I signed the last page, pen steady, then stepped into a hallway that felt 2 sizes bigger. Outside, the sun had that late afternoon honesty older folks love. Nothing fancy. Everything clear. I texted Marlene, "We have an order. Thank you for helping keep him safe." The next morning, I woke early and mixed batter the way my mom taught me. Cup, scrape, whisk till smooth. Ethan wandered in with bed hair and that look kids get when home actually feels like home. "Pancakes?" he asked, and I said, "Always." He poured too much syrup and we let it happen. The house smelled like vanilla and coffee, the kind of peace you can't fake. We ran through spelling words, argued about whether superheroes do chores, and laughed at a knock-knock joke that didn't deserve it. Older dads know the sound, a child laughing in a kitchen you fought to keep. After dishes, we taped his newest drawing to the fridge, a lopsided dinosaur, toothy and brave. I checked the locks out of habit, then stopped halfway down the hall and realized my shoulders had finally lowered. Justice Restored isn't fireworks. It's a kid's backpack on a hook and a bedroom door you close at night knowing the world outside can knock, and your house will hold. When the noise finally faded, I heard the house breathe. Coffee on the stove, pencil scratches at the table, my son asking if superheroes have to make their beds. That's when the lesson landed clean. Justice isn't revenge. It's protection. Older men will get this. There are messes you don't mop with anger. You contain them with boundaries. I didn't win by shouting. I won by showing. Timestamps, witnesses, a plate in a reflection. Calm wasn't weakness. It was my seatbelt. And fatherhood was the wheel I kept both hands on. People ask if I feel sorry for Jessica. I don't feel anything loud. I feel clear. I didn't destroy Jessica's life. I just refused to let her destroy mine. That's the work a man does when he trades impulse for outcome. You gather the receipts, you tell the truth, and you stand where it holds. Out the window, the world looks ordinary again. Mail trucks, lawns, a kid's bike. Inside, it's stronger than ordinary. It's safe on purpose. And that, finally, is enough. If you've ever been betrayed, you know that silence after the storm. The house finally still. The coffee warm again. You're breathing your own. That's where I am. Forgiveness is peace. Consequences are protection. I didn't choose punishment. I chose boundaries that keep my son and me whole. And every night, before I lock the doors, I pause at his doorway and whisper the same 4 words. "You're safe here." That's the payoff. Not fireworks, not victory laps, just a home that holds because truth is the frame. If this story found you at the right time, I want to hear from you. Drop your city in the comments so I know where my people are. And if you've ever chosen protection over pretending, type "earned" so others see they're not alone. Subscribe if you want more than drama, if you want receipts, lessons, and endings that mean something. Tomorrow, I'll tell you another truth we all need to hear. And if you're standing in a storm right now, borrow this. Lock up, breathe, and say it out loud. You're safe here.